Very good. Well, good morning. It's great to see everyone here. Thank you for fellowshipping with us in our worship, and thank you for sharing with us here. It's just so encouraging to share and worshiping the Almighty Creator together. So, we want to look at puzzle pieces of faith this morning, and that's going to work into being one heart and one soul with God. So, This is going to be an interesting lesson. We're going to look at this really in two parts. We're going to look at some low-hanging fruit and pull that out of a couple of verses in Hebrews 11, which is our text, if you want to be turning there, start your notes. And then we're going to go on a deeper level because we're going to do a more broad textual study of Hebrews 11 and show a number of threads or puzzle pieces, if you will, that the writer draws out and puts together to show this deeper and richer panorama of what God's end result that he intends with faith is. There we go. All right, so let's look at Hebrews chapter 11, beginning of verse 6. It says, "But without faith, it is impossible to please him, for he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him." And I do like the New King James here because it draws out this diligently. It's this more intensive form of seeking in the original language. By faith, Noah, being divinely warned of things not yet seen, moved with godly fear, prepared an ark for the saving of his household, by which he condemned the world and became heir of righteousness, which is according to faith. So, what does it mean to believe? Let's pull this out. First of all, we have to believe in God. That's just like the beginning level. You have to start somewhere, and this is kind of a basic foundational place to start. You have to believe that God exists, that he's real. If you don't believe God is really real, it's hard to build anything on top of that. It's hard to have a relationship with someone who's not real. It's hard to obey someone who's not real. It's hard to believe that someone who's not real loves you, right? Matter of fact, with new Christians, that's a kind of a big step as you learn to pray. If you feel like you're just talking into an empty room, it's awfully hard to pray, isn't it? And so we have to understand that he exists, that he is. And then again, it says we must diligently seek him. We can't interact with a God that we're not seeking, right? We can't say that I believe in him and I have faith in him, which that's a foundational piece I need to point out. Belief and faith, for this discussion, are pretty much just different tenses of the same word. And so when you hear those two, understand that they're synonyms. All right, and so if we are saying, well, I believe in God, and we're saying, I have faith in God, and I'm trying to grow my faith and want to get stronger in my faith, well, part of that's going to necessarily entail seeking him. But it doesn't just say, hey, diligently seek me. He says there's a result to that action. If you follow this path, God will reward you. That's a foundation of faith. So if we were to build kind of this framework of understanding the pieces of faith, we're beginning to kind of build a network or a framework or a system that we can understand everything that's in here. Look at Noah here. What does he do? He does exactly what God tells him to. It's almost like he thought he needed to follow God's instructions in order to not be drowned in the flood. Just almost. It's almost like he knew he needed God's help, God's plan to follow God instead of, I think a raft will be fine, which it would not have been in the cataclysmic storms that happened with this water coming up from beneath and opening out, the heavens opening and pouring down from above. The earthquakes that were probably part of that, the raft would not have worked. He didn't come up with his own plan, did he? He said, no, I need God to save me. And he had to take action on his belief, didn't he? He did something. I'm moving through these rather quickly because I think this is low-hanging fruit. I think all of this is necessarily obvious with the text and how Noah reacted here. And you'll notice this phrase, by faith, Noah being warned, but then he moved with godly fear, prepared an ark. We've got to take action on that belief. If I believe when my friend says they're giving out free Lamborghinis, all you got to do is go pick one up at the dealership. I'm going to sit at home and wait for them to deliver it, right? If I believe I'm going to get one, even if I don't like Lamborghinis, I can resell it, guys. Right? If I believe, I'm going to take action. And we see this pattern over and over throughout the text. All right. And it looks like I put the note in here at the bottom that he rewards those. Did Noah get rewarded? Was his household, in fact, saved from the flood and saved their lives? Absolutely. Yeah, so. And then if we believe that he rewards us, and we believe that we have to take action in all of these things we've just talked about, and we live a life of faith, we're going to continue a journey of building our faith, growing closer to God throughout our lives. That's going to be a natural process. We kind of see all these photographs, these snapshots in time with each of these heroes of faith. But many of these were part of their journey where they're learning to trust God, or it's the climax of their journey, like where Abraham offers Isaac. It's a climax of his journey. Even though it's a snapshot in time, this is part of an overall journey of their lives. Well, that's a lesson in and of itself, right? That's a sermon by itself. Let's dig a little deeper, though. Now that we've got the low-hanging fruit, let's go a little deeper here. With this, we're going to pull out these pieces of the puzzle, and we're going to see different themes that the writer slowly brings in and ties back to each other so that they're woven together, just like those puzzle pieces locking into place. They interact with each other. So if we back up in the text a little bit, we can look at verses 4 and 5. By faith, Abel offered, right? So he had faith and he did something. We noticed that pattern already. And, I think for a long time I thought that Hebrews 11 was a list of all of these associations with actions with faith, right? By faith they did something, and he lists so many of them for emphasis. But what we're going to find out is there's a lot more pieces, a lot more moving parts here. Okay, don't think I actually, okay, yeah, belief with action. So we got that. And there's more to it, okay? Abel offered to God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, through which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts. So let's just unpack that briefly. God is on the witness stand in the courtroom, and God is saying, Abel, because you gave me that sacrifice, you are in the right. And we know that Cain gave a different sacrifice, which was evidently in the wrong. And God portrays that by rejecting Cain, right? He doesn't approve of Cain. And Cain's angry with God because of that, and there's that whole story there. So bringing that forward here in Hebrews, the other side of it was that Abel was in the right. He gave the right sacrifice. Well, why was one sacrifice right and the other wrong? Evidently, God told him what he wanted. And Abel did it, and Cain did what he wanted to do. He did something different. Okay, so there's the whole picture here. And then it says that through his offering, through his right offering, that doing what God asked, he being dead still speaks. He's not just dead, right? He's executed by his brother. His brother is jealous and kills him because he was accepted. Abel was accepted, but Cain was not. But that whole story, as God put it in that account, your brother's blood, Cain, cries out to me from the ground. It's screaming. It's bearing witness. Someone innocent who did right was unjustly murdered. And so, even though Abel is dead, he has an essence of life. There's still a message that we hear echoed down through the millennia of faith, doing what God said, someone being approved. There's a thread that's begun here of life out of death. And we're going to see that built on. It's a little faint right now, but he's going to strengthen it as he goes along. There's life out of Abel's death. He is still speaking. He still has a form of life. In verse 5, by faith, Enoch was taken away so that he did not see death. So this is early on in the generations of Adam and those first few chapters of Genesis. And we don't know much. He walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Here, Hebrews doesn't supply a lot more. It just says he was taken away so that he did not see death. I think the word translated is in our English translations back in Genesis. And it says, and he was not found because God had taken him. For before he was taken, he had this testimony that he pleased God. What did he escape? So he pleased God and he had faith and he was living by faith. We know that because he's walking with God. He's got fellowship with God. He escaped death. There's life, and he escaped death. He's strengthening this thread. All right. Now we get back to Noah again in our progression through Hebrews 11. By faith, Noah, being divinely warned of things not yet seen. We read this earlier. What did he receive? The salvation of his family. They didn't die in the flood. Life, where there was death from the punishment of the flood all around them. Life is coming out of death. Why? Because of faith. Because of believing God and acting on it. Now there's life where there should have been, would have been, could have been death. Now, at the end here, it mentions that Noah became an heir of righteousness. And this is a new piece, a new thread that's going to be locked into place in this picture that we're seeing. He became an heir of righteousness, which is according to faith. It doesn't go into this very deeply. It's going to be developed more. But what does an heir receive? An heir is supposed to receive an inheritance, right? Which generally is quite a bit of money. My kids are in trouble, but plus there's too many of them. I got to share it. I got to share all 5 of my dollars. I'm going to leave them. That's not really the idea of heir, is it? When there's inheritance, it's usually a significant inheritance. So he's beginning this idea. He's touching on it here. In 8 through 10, we see that Abraham obeys when he calls, is called to go to the place which he would receive as an inheritance. So again, pulling this new piece of the puzzle in. There's an inheritance. We talked about Noah being an heir. Abraham was going to receive an inheritance. He went out not knowing where he was going. This was difficult. That's the whole piece of faith, right? Faith. There's something hard to do. I didn't kind of enunciate that earlier, but if it's something that I would have done anyway, that's not really an act of faith, right? I'm not believing God and doing something that is hard for me. All right, so Abraham did something that was hard for him, and so he dwells in the land of promise as in a foreign country. And then he emphasizes this idea of being homeless by saying he's dwelling in tents with his son and grandson, kind of pulling them together in this type. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob dwelt in tents. They didn't have a permanent habitation. If you're homeless, what do you want? How about a home? How about a home? We sing that song, "This World Is Not Our Home." Well, if this world is not our home, and we're looking for a home, and he's going to develop that. And he pulls in this idea of being heirs again. Look at that. So they're homeless, they're dwelling in tents. We usually use words, by the way, like Hebrew, which means wanderer, or sojourner, like you're just passing through, and words like that here. So he's got that idea, and then he mentions this word heirs again. So they're homeless, sojourners, wanderers. They're looking for a home. There's an inheritance coming, and he's going to pull that together in a moment. It says that Abraham waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. He begins to foreshadow the inheritance. He begins to foreshadow the home. 11 and 12. We get yet another piece introduced. But before that, we have, by faith, Sarah herself also received strength to conceive seed. Okay, so Sarah, right, she can't have children. She's barren. And plus, she's too old now. She's past the time when any woman could have a child. But yet she receives strength to conceive a seed. She bears a child. And if you're making notes, you might want to put down Romans 4:19, because it's making the same point in Romans 4. And the way it says it there is the deadness of Sarah's womb. So again, pointing toward death, but out of death comes life. Is that the way it works, guys? There's a funeral, and then they come back to life, right? That never happens. And so God is illustrating his power, his majesty, his mercy, his love, who he is, with this theme of life out of death. And that was Isaac. It was life. It was a newborn baby where there could be no baby. And the contrast is death here in a biblical picture. And then in verse 12 says, therefore from one man and him as good as dead. Well, that's Dad. That's Abraham. And it's saying that he was older. It's a contrast. Death, but yet the life of Isaac, the son of promise, came. And again, Romans 4:19 emphasizes that, just saying, hey, he's almost 100 years old. All right. Here's our next piece. Out of this death came life, but it wasn't just a little bit of life. This offspring was innumerable as the sand of the sea and as many as the stars of the sky. Abraham and Sarah had one son of promise. And then Isaac has one son of promise, and he has 12 sons, but then it quickly becomes, after about 400 years, a couple million people leaving Egypt. And that's an estimate. We don't really have them numbered, and there's probably a reason for that, because they're supposed to be innumerable. So in Hebrews 2, and let me read that to you. Hebrews 2, verses 9 and 10. But we see Jesus, who was made a little lower than the angels, for the suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor, that he, by the grace of God, might taste death for everyone. So it talks about his death, and it's going to talk about the salvation here. And so that's why I included verse 9, because we need this foundation of the context of what this salvation is and who these children are. For it was fitting for him, for whom are all things and by whom are all things, and bringing many sons to glory, to make the captain of their salvation, Jesus, perfect through sufferings. There's a lot there to unpack. We're just going to look at the idea here that Jesus Christ, through his death, brings life. Sound like a familiar theme? He brings life, and he doesn't just bring a little bit of life. He brings many, many children to God. And here we all are. That's the theme. in Hebrews 11 and 12. The children, and this is like the physical thing that foreshadows the church that Jesus did. The children here in verse 12 are innumerable as the sand of the seashore. So many children is that piece. All right. These all died in faith, verses 13 and 14, not having received the promises. Hold up. So faith, we act on our belief, and we receive a promise, an inheritance. We receive life out of death, and that didn't happen for them. What gives? They died in faith, not having received the promises, but having them seen them afar off, were assured of them. That's faith. They believed. They embraced them. They embraced these promises and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. They did the thing. They were the wanderers. They were the pilgrims. They were the homeless. They're looking for that home. For those who say such things declare plainly that they declare a homeland. And verse 15 points out, if they had wanted to go back, like Lot's wife who looked back, if they had looked back, they could have gone back to their old way of life. They could have made the decision to go back to the world and not trust God and not be part of His salvation, but they didn't. They kept pursuing God, but they didn't receive the promises. And so 16 says, now they desire a better, that is a heavenly country. They have something better that they're looking for. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God. You can almost hear God's voice in the passage. You're going to be faithful to me in spite of everything that you're going through, and you're going to keep your eyes locked on the vision and trust that even though you don't receive the promises right now, that I'll reward you one day. I'm proud to call you my daughter. I'm proud to call you my son. These are the children that I've wanted all along. He is not ashamed to be called their God, for He has prepared a city for them. There it is. There is the rest of the picture. They died in faith. They didn't receive the promises because it's coming in the future. It's a heavenly country. It's the New Jerusalem coming down out of heaven as a bride adorned for her husband, and all of God's faithful children receive this reward together. And I'm getting ahead of myself. But that's what we have here at the end of this passage. They were stoned. They were sawn in two, were tempted, were slain with a sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. People with this kind of vision, this kind of strength, this kind of connection with their Maker, their Redeemer, and their God, who go through these kind of sufferings, much like Abel, who suffered innocently. The world's not worthy of them. They're made of better stuff, something higher. That's what God does for you and for me. He transforms us into something higher and brings us home to something higher. I'm still getting ahead of myself. The world's not worthy of these people. They wandered in deserts and mountains and dens and caves of the earth, and all these, having obtained a good testimony through faith, did not receive the promise. He's still on this train of thought. They didn't receive the promise yet. God, having provided something better for, you expect it to be for them. Look at everything they've gone through. They should receive something better. God having provided something better for us. Us, those who obey God under the new covenant, those who come to Christ, to God through Christ, that they should not be made perfect or complete apart from us. So that's why I said earlier, they God wants to provide the promise, the inheritance for all of the heirs at one time together. So it's time to apply this. It's time for the takeaway. Now that we know what God's end game is, now that all of these pieces have woven together to provide this sweeping picture of what God has in mind for the end, that gives us the strength to keep going, doesn't it? If they went through all of those things and God says, well, you can have the reward when the rest of your brothers and sisters come home. I want to be one of those brothers and sisters. Now that we know what God's plan is, we can be one heart and one soul with Him, which is our mission here at this church. One heart and one soul. Once we know how good God's plan is and that He is able to bring it about, that He has always brought life out of death. He has always adopted heirs and provided an immense inheritance for them. That He has always had people who are homeless and misfits and out of place and didn't fit into this life and this world, and promised them a home where they belong, with family, brothers and sisters, a parent, where they feel at home. And we know that He's always brought many children together. He's going to do it for us. And I love that. When I see God's heart, I want the same thing He wants because it's the best. It's absolutely better than any other thing that I could live for. Hope this is helpful for you this morning. And if there's anything that we can do to help you get right with God and be part of this vision and be called to a higher plane and get closer to God, to be one heart and one soul with Him, we'd love to help you. If you have any needs, you can talk to anybody afterward, or if you want to, you can come forward while we stand and while we sing.